Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Anjali Shetty. Today I'm going to discuss the second part of the muscle tone. In the first part, as we have already discussed how the muscle tone, the part 1 we have discussed in the first session, and today this will be the second session on the mechanism of tone. Now the objectives of this particular discussion were to see the definition of muscle tone, the mechanism of maintenance of muscle tone, what is the role of reflexes in the maintenance of muscle tone, and what are the applied aspects of muscle tone. Now in the previous session, the part 1 session of the muscle tone, we have seen the definition of muscle tone, the mechanism and the role of reflexes, and in today's session we are just concentrating on the applied aspect of muscle tone. So kindly again see that particular session if you want to revise this particular part. So in this particular session, the abnormalities which are related to the muscle tone we are going to see. Now what will be the abnormalities? There are conditions where the muscle tone will be disturbed, and these are the following conditions in which you are getting the change in the muscle tone. So you have the decerebration, you can have the change in decortication, some of the cerebellar disorders. There is one condition known as clonus, the hypertonia. In that we can see spasticity and rigidity. There is dystonia and hypotonia. So these all are conditions which are related to tone, the change in abnormal change in the muscle tone. So one by one we are going to see this. What exactly is decerebration? So first we are going to see the decerebration. Now this generally decerebration, it is experimentally done to study at the level of mid-collicular lesion. That means there is a complete transection of the brainstem between the superior and the inferior colliculi. So it is in between the colliculars, and hence it is termed as mid-collicular cerebration. So there will occur mid-collicular decerebration. Now what will happen due to that? The higher brain structures which are controlling over these brainstem pathways, that will be lost, and the brainstem pathways, they will function independent of their input from the higher brain structures. So due to the decerebration, you will lose the higher brain control. We have seen that there is excitation, reticulospinal pathway will cause the hyperactivity in the extensor muscles. If you look at the arms and the legs, they will be extended and rotated internally, and this is a particular position which is known as extensor posturing, that is going to see in the patient of decerebrate rigidity. So this is what you see in decerebrate rigidity. Now coming to the second abnormality, which is decortication. Now this, as the name suggests, it is what you do is remove the cerebral cortex, and if you are removing the cerebral cortex, it produces the decorticate rigidity. So suppose there is a lesion, or by experimental conditions you remove the cerebral cortex, then you will get this type of rigidity. You can see in the picture there is a flexion in the upper extremity and extension, which is hyper extension in the lower extremities. So the flexion is due to the rubrospinal excitation of flexor muscles in the upper extremities. So the rubrospinal excitation will not be lost, so it will be there, and due to that the flexor muscles will be showing the flexions in the upper extremity, but the lower extremity, they will show the same changes that occur after mid-collicular decerebration, and due to that there is hyperextension of the lower extremity, and this is the position which is normally seen in the decorticate posture, which is also known as flexor posturing. The arms are flexed or bent inwards on the chest, the hands are clenched into fist, and the legs are extended and the feet are turned inward. So if the patient is coming to you in this particular position, just by looking at the patient, you can differentiate between the decerebrate type of rigidity or decorticate type of posture. So this is the second abnormality in the muscle tone. What is the role of cerebellum in the maintenance of muscle tone? Actually, there is no direct effect on the muscle tone. on the spinal reflex pathway, as there is no direct connection as a cerebellospinal tract. So it doesn't have any normal direct connection, but it can influence the muscle tone, as we have seen in the previous part also, that it affects the connections with the vestibular and the reticular nuclei. So it has an inhibitory influence on these activities of the tract, the vestibulospinal tract and the reticulospinal tract. And due to that, the muscle tone can be changed in cases of cerebellum diseases. If there are pure cerebellar lesions, they classically produce the hypotonia, as this function, which is excitation, is lost due to the loss of vestibular and brainstem reticular nuclei. Coming to the disorders which are commonly asked as a short note also, the disorders of muscle tone. So what type of disorders we can get? We can get increase in the tone, which is termed as hypertonia. This hypertonia can be pyramidal type or it can be extrapyramidal type. If it is pyramidal hypertonia, then it is termed as spasticity, whereas if it is extrapyramidal type, then it is termed as rigidity. Then it can be a decreased tone, which is termed as hypotone. So see the pyramidal hypertonia, that is termed as spasticity. Now what is spasticity? It is a motor disorder characterized by velocity dependent increase in muscle tone. So velocity dependent means whenever you are changing the velocity at that particular position, at that particular movement, you are getting the resistance, the increase in the muscle tone, and that is termed as spasticity. It will show exaggerated tendon jerks resulting from hyperexcitability of the stretch reflex. So what happens? It is a disorder which is continuously monitoring the velocity. So it is dependent on the velocity, and velocity dependent change in the velocity will cause the increase in the muscle tone. Why? Because there is hyperexcitability of the stretch reflex. This pyramidal hypertonia is most pronounced in the muscle groups which are used in voluntary movements. So if you see a patient, you see whenever you are doing some voluntary activity, at that particular point there is a change in the velocity, and due to that the voluntary movements, the group of muscles which are involved in the voluntary movements are affected most, and they will show this. It is the physiological evidence suggests that there is an interruption of reticulospinal projection, and this is important in the genesis of spasticity. So there is lesion in the reticulospinal projection. In the spinal cord lesion, there is a bilateral damage of pyramidal as well as the reticulospinal pathways, and that can produce severe spasticity. Sometimes there are flexor spasms reflecting the increased tone in the flexor muscle groups and weakness of extensor muscles. So sometimes, very commonly, there is only interruption of the reticulospinal projection, and that will genesis the increase in the muscle tone related to spasticity. But in some spinal cord lesions, there will be bilateral damage to the pyramidal tract also and the reticulospinal pathways also, and this can produce very severe spasticity. So there is flexor spasm, and so in this particular figure we can see this, that this is presynaptic inhibition. See, before the synapse there is inhibition through these synapses. Then you can have the recurrent inhibition via the Renshaw cells. So these nerve cells will be going towards Renshaw cells, and these Renshaw cells then are going to inhibit the alpha motor neurons. And the reciprocal inhibition is that if one group is activated, the other group of the muscle fiber will be inhibited, the antagonistic muscle, and that is termed as reciprocal inhibition. And this produces the spasticity, which is due to the pyramidal tract lesion. Now what is the clinical correlation? In the cortical and the internal capsular lesions, very commonly these are in the accident injuries, we can see these. The controlling drive on the inhibitory center in the medullary brainstem is lost. The cortex and the capsule, they are controlling the medullary brainstem. And how they are going to control? They are causing the inhibition of the activity. Now this is lost, and so in absence of these inhibitory influences, the lateral radiculospinal tract originating from this center, it facilitates the action of ventral radiculospinal tract and it becomes unopposed. So there is no inhibition at all because we have lost the inhibitory control due to the lesion, and this results in spastic hemiplegia with anti-gravity posturing. But the flexor spasms are unusual in these. There is no explanation for these flexor spasms. Now there is one abnormality after discussing this particular uh, spasticity. We also see clonus. Clonus is a phenomena of involuntary rhythmic contraction in response to sudden sustained stretch. So what was spasticity? It was related to velocity, and that was seen due to the voluntary movements. Now this clonus is related to involuntary contractions in the muscles, and they are in response to sustained stretch. So there is no change in the position, no change in the velocity, but still you are seeing the involuntary rhythmic contraction, and this particular condition is termed as clonus. What happens is there is a sudden stretch which activates the muscle spindle that results in stretch reflex. The tension which is produced by the muscle contraction that activates the Golgi tendon organs and in turn activates an inverse stretch reflex, relaxing the muscle. This is normally is occurring in our body. Sudden stretch reflex will be there, muscle will start contracting. How much to contract? It will be judged by Golgi tendon. If the Golgi tendon organs are activated, they will in turn activated an inverse stretch reflex, and due to that there will be inhibition of the stretch reflex, relaxing of the muscle will occur. So contraction will stop and relaxation of the muscle is there. If the stretch is sustained, now in cases of sustained stretch, what happens is these muscle spindles are again activated and they will cause a cycle or alternating contraction, relaxation, contraction, relaxation. So there is no complete stoppage of the activity. This alternating contraction and relaxation movements will go on, and this condition is termed as clonus. Coming to the fifth abnormality, which is rigidity, and this rigidity is related to extrapyramidal region. This rigidity is characterized by an increase in the muscle tone causing the resistance to external movements. It is not velocity dependent and it can be elicited at very low speeds of passive movements. So rigidity and the spasticity, the difference is that whenever you are moving at that particular point, if you are seeing the increased resistance, then it is termed as spasticity. But even at the low speed of passive movement also, if you are feeling increased tone, then it is termed as rigidity, and it can be felt in both agonist as well as antagonistic muscles. There are two types of rigidity which are very commonly seen. One is lead pipe rigidity and the other is cog wheel rigidity. Now what is lead pipe rigidity? It results when an increase in the muscle tone causes a sustained resistance to passive movement throughout the whole range of motion with no fluctuations at all. So like a pipe, if you are having there and if you are trying to bend the lead pipe, then whatever resistance which you are seeing, it is continuously till it ends. You will be feeling the resistance. So that type of resistance is termed as lead pipe rigidity. So throughout the whole range of motion there is resistance. Whereas in cog wheel rigidity, it is occurring due to contraction of agonist and antagonistic muscle alternately, so that increased tone is not felt throughout the range of motion, but it is intermittent. Okay, so the agonist will show the rigidity, then the antagonist, then the agonist, then the antagonist. So there is continuous stoppage, again rigidity, stoppage, again rigidity. Like that you will see the cog wheel, like a spokes of wheel, you will get the rigidity. So it is not throughout the range of motion. The basal ganglia structures are clearly the cause for this pathophysiology of rigidity. So in cases of basal ganglia lesions, very commonly these type of rigidities are seen. Now you can also experience dystonia. So what is dystonia? Is abnormal muscle spasm, and it is producing the distorted motor control and undesired postures. So whatever plan of action, whatever plan of posture will not be there, and there will be distortion of the motor control. So you're losing the motor control, and a principle is the loss of cortical inhibition. So the higher control center which are inhibiting, which are causing the control over these activities will be lost, and there is failure of surround inhibition also. So as there is cortical inhibition plus the surround inhibition, the brain activates a specific movement and simultaneously inhibits the unwanted movements. So that is normal, and there is an distorted motor control giving an undesired posture termed as dystonia. Then you also have hypotonia, which is affecting the muscle resistance to passive movement and the extensibility also. So there is decrease in the tone of the muscle. And the etiological types of hypotonia are whenever there is a nerve trunk or nerve root lesion, a lesion in the anterior horn of the spinal cord, in cases of cerebellar lesion, in cases of cerebral lesion. So in all these conditions you get decrease in the tone, or there may be congenital causes, genetic causes, developmental causes, acquired causes, genetic again, and infectious neuromuscular juncture. So all of these can lead to decrease in the muscle tone, causing hypotonia to occur. The clinical examination to examine the tone is very difficult. The determination of the tone becomes very subjective and is prone to inter-examiner variability. So there is difficult to assess, right? The most important part of the examination of the tone is determination of the resistance of relaxed muscles to passive manipulation. And what we have to see is, apart from the resistance, the extensibility, the flexibility, and the range of motion. The examination of tone needs to have a relaxed and cooperative patient. So due to all these factors, the examination of the tone becomes very difficult to assess. But there are methods. Inspection, attitude of the limb at rest. By inspection you can judge. Palpation, feel the muscle, whether it is normal, firm or flabby. Then see for the range of movements at the joint. Then you try the passive movements, first slowly and then through complete range of motion, and then at varying speeds. So you can try all these passive movements and see the resistance. Check the distal part of the limb. You can brace a limb and suddenly remove the support. Then you can have bilateral examination of homologous parts, which helps to compare in both the limbs. So these are the methods by which you can examine the tone, and there are some specific maneuvers which are termed as Babinski's tonus test, the head dropping test, the Wartenberg's pendulum test, the shoulder shaking test, and the arm dropping test. So these are specific maneuvers to see after doing all inspection palpation. You can go for these specific maneuvers, and then you can find out whether it is a spasticity or rigidity. So thank you all. That is all regarding the particular applied aspect of muscle tone.